Internal hernia. What's internal hernia? You know, hernia, what's the definition of a hernia? Hernia is protrusion of organ or part of organ, protrusion of organ or part of organ outside its normal anatomical containing cavity, outside the boundaries of its anatomical cavity. There are external hernias that we know about, like inguinal hernia, direct and indirect, femoral hernias, spigelian hernias, lumbar hernias. We know all about that, isn't it? But there are hernias that are internal. You can't see it by eye. That's a very rare type of hernias, but it's so difficult to diagnose because nothing shows on the surface, everything happening inside. So what are the sites where internal herniation happen? One site is, you know, that's liver. Right? And that's stomach. And between the liver and the lesser curve of the stomach and first part of duodenum is lesser omentum, right? Anatomy abdomen. Lesser omentum. We know that behind the lesser omentum, you will enter a sac called omental bursa, refer to abdomen anatomy, right? Or also called lesser sac. This opening, which communicate to the lesser sac behind the stomach, is called foramen of Winslow, right? We know that. Foramen of Winslow. One type of internal herniation is that a bowel segment decide to peek itself through the foramen of Winslow. It herniate through foramen of Winslow and into the omental bursa, into the lesser sac. It can become obstructed or strangulated at this point, right? So that's one site, foramen of Winslow. Another site, you know mesentery? This is a segment of small bowel. Of course, small bowel is hanged with a mesentery, right? Small bowel is hanged with a mesentery where blood vessels and lymphatics and nerves course in and to the small bowel. Is that right? Mesentery. Okay. Sometimes there is a defect in the mesentery. Sometimes there is a defect, a small defect in the mesentery, and this defect could be congenital defect, it's congenitally present there, or it could be iatrogenic defect, that during a surgery a hole has been made in the mesentery, was not recognized. So maybe another small loop of bowel move through this area, through the mesenteric defect. That's a form of internal herniation. And also it can become strangulated at this point. A similar defect may be seen in the transverse mesocolon. We know that this is ascending colon, and then we have transverse mesocolon. And the transverse colon is hanged to the posterior body wall, mainly pancreas, along the pancreas, by the transverse mesocolon. A similar defect may be seen in the transverse mesocolon, and again, bowel can move through that defect, is that right, and become obstructed or strangulated at this point. Also, you know uterus, another site, uterus. The uterus and the fallopian tubes are hanged by broad ligament to the side wall of the pelvis, right? Broad ligament. Again, there may be defect in the broad ligament is a peritoneal reflection that hangs the uterus and fallopian tubes and ovaries. And if there's a defect, again, maybe in the broad ligament there's a defect, congenital or acquired, again, bowel may pass through that defect and become obstructed inside that defect in broad ligament. Another example is duodenal fossae. Let me tell you what's that about. You know, that's first part duodenum. First part duodenum is intraperitoneal. First part duodenum is intraperitoneal. It's hanged by hepatoduodenal ligament, which is part of lesser omentum. Second part dips beneath peritoneum. It becomes retroperitoneal, covered by peritoneum. So at this point, it enters under peritoneum, becomes retro. And then third part is also retroperitoneal. Then fourth part, as it moves up, right, it enters back again into the peritoneal cavity and becomes continuous with jejunum. This area is hanged by ligament of Treitz. Is that right? That hangs the the DJ flexure, duodenojejunal flexure. Now, as the duodenum, fourth part of duodenum, emerge out from the peritoneum, it creates folds. A pocket of peritoneum, I will just draw this area on its own here. Okay, so that's fourth part duodenum moving out and becoming continuous with jejunum. So this is the point where it has moved out from the peritoneum. Now it's intraperitoneal. Okay, now when it moves out, there is two folds created. That's peritoneum, right? There are two folds created, or two pockets of peritoneum created. A pocket above, there's a pocket here above the DJ flexure, and a pocket below the DJ flexure. A pocket above and pocket below. The pocket above it, you can put your hand here, right? So if you see it like this, if you see it from above, that's your eye. If you see it from above, how are you gonna see it? This is the bowel loop, and that is the mesentery going under. You get me? Going under. So there's a pocket underneath. You can put your hand here. This pocket above the DJ flexure is called superior duodenal fossa. Superior duodenal fossa. And the pocket below here is called inferior duodenal fossa. Inferior duodenal fossa. Again, these fossae, a bowel loop may stick itself either here or here, above or under DJ junction, in the superior or inferior duodenal fossa. Another fossa is just next to the DJ flexure, which is the most important fossa. Just to the left of the DJ flexure. Look, passing here is the inferior mesenteric vein, okay? Inferior mesenteric vein will pass here. This is inferior mesenteric vein. And so this is IMA, inferior mesenteric, IMV, sorry, inferior mesenteric vein. And this is the DJ junction. There's a pocket of peritoneum between them. I will give it different colors so that it's easy. There's a pocket of peritoneum between them. You get me? This pocket of peritoneum, just to the left of the DJ junction and just to the right of inferior mesenteric vein, is called paraduodenal fossa. Paraduodenal fossa. Okay, also called fossa of Landsert. Another name for it, maybe in the exam, it comes like this: fossa of Landsert. Fossa of Landsert. That's the fossa here. Fossa of Landsert, this area. This is the most important out of these duodenal fossae because it's the most common location out of these fossae. The most common location is fossa of Landsert, paraduodenal fossa. Another location or an example I can give you is congenital diaphragmatic hernia. Remember, Bogdalic, it's a form of internal hernia, Bogdalic, and there is Morgagni, Bogdalic and Morgagni hernia. Remember that? Can be also a form of internal herniation. Or acquired diaphragmatic defect, like in trauma. Diaphragmatic injury, especially lateral compressive trauma, can rupture the diaphragm, especially blunt, causing large radial tears in blunt trauma through which bowel can herniate, or penetrating trauma, usually small defect. Okay? Okay, so we talked examples of internal hernia, locations of internal hernia. We have foramen of Winslow, a defect in mesentery, a defect in transverse mesocolon, a defect in broad ligament, congenital and acquired diaphragmatic hernia, duodenal fossae, is that right? And also we have two more locations. You know sigmoid mesocolon? The root of sigmoid mesocolon is V-shaped, like this. And the mesentery emerge out from that V-shaped root. And of course sigmoid is hanged over here, that's sigmoid colon by its mesentery. This is reflected, you get me? Suppose we have a hook here and we reflected the sigmoid colon to this side to show the root and apex of it. The apex is a pocket, as you can see, it's a pocket. So the apex of the sigmoid mesocolon can be site for internal herniation. This is referred to, this fossa is called intersigmoid fossa. Intersigmoid fossa. Also, when we look at the cecum, the last location now, cecum and appendix. The cecum is intraperitoneal. So under the cecum, internal herniation may happen. This is called cecal retroperitoneal fossa. Cecal retroperitoneal fossa. So 8 examples of internal herniation in total. Okay? So how to treat internal hernia? Generally, you have to have a laparotomy, usually, because in most of the cases they are unrecognized until they are strangulated. And the general situation is that you divide the constricting agent. This is the margin or the neck of the hernia that is constricting, and that's bowel moving through it. All right. So general situation is that you divide the neck of hernia to allow the bowel to move away, to move out, to reduce it back, and you close the defect. But there are certain locations where you cannot do that. First location is the paraduodenal fossa. Why? Because if bowel is stuck over here, distended, cannot be reduced, you cannot divide this constricting ring because you have duodenum or jejunum on one side and major blood vessel, inferior mesenteric vein, also colic, middle colic artery is moving here, ascending branch, that these vessels will become damaged. So you cannot divide the neck. So what you do, you decompress the bowel. You introduce a needle into the distended bowel, decompress to allow them to, that is, collapse, and then you can move them out. Another example where you cannot do that is foramen of Winslow. If there's herniation through foramen of Winslow, because of course the free edge of the defect, this one, free edge contain the portal triad. Contains portal vein, hepatic artery, and bile duct. So you can't divide the neck of hernia here. Again, you have to decompress and move it out. So this is one special form of internal herniation, which is internal hernias. Internal hernias. Okay, good. Next, we want to talk about another special form of dynamic intestinal obstruction, which is bolus obstruction.